What is up, guys? Welcome back to Honor Among Thieves podcast. Your host is always Nelson Rodriguez Jr. Honor Among Thieves, the rebrand. I love this new name. It's very me, let me tell you. Today, very special guest. Very honored to have him in my space, all the way from the top of the podcast game to visit us little people. What's up, Ian? So say goodnight to the bad guy.
You looking at the bad guy. This the last time that you ever see a bad guy like me. You don't have the guts to be who you wanna be.
What's up, Nelson? Thanks for having me on. Part 2, baby. Love the new name. Love what you got going on. Beautiful studio.
Appreciate it. I have friends in high places.
Yeah, you definitely have the connections to pull this one off. I'll tell you that. But it's nice. It's comfy. I like the chairs and everything. It's good.
Nicest. The red lights. I got a lot of compliments on those.
Yeah, it goes with the Honor Among Thieves. It reminds me of the new movie Den of Thieves that I just saw. Den of Thieves 2.
Bro, you know what's crazy? I saw the whole trailer for Den of Thieves 2, and I was like, Den of Thieves would be great if you interviewed like a bunch of bank robbers and shit and like scumbag. And then I was like, oh shit, wait, Den of Thieves. Wait, no, Honor. Oh, shit, Honor. And then that's how I came up with it.
That's how you came up with it?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
After I watched the Den of Thieves 2 trailer.
Yeah, it's a good name. It's catchy. Your logo looks good. Everything looks really good.
I appreciate it, bro.
I'll still call you the Prophet, though. But
I mean, that's still my thing, Montana,
Do you even have a personal Instagram, or is it just a show?
Yeah, no, I have the show, and then my personal one is separate. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Which, it's funny because I see you, and I see a couple guys doing it, and I'm like, man, should I have done it like just one account?
Well, I'm not the norm. Most people do separate accounts. Yeah,
right?
but I just figured, like I am locked in, might as well grow this together. Why grow 2 different accounts, do all that, So it worked out. Now I have a decent following on my personal platforms, and that helps in the long run.
Right.
Because if I ever were to change or do something else, it kind of converts over.
True. And the personal brand, you're involved in everything, so the personal brand kind of just is, yeah.
Yeah, I do everything, so,
I get it. So my brother, I, very different this time around, doing things a little more legitimate. Not an iPhone and a fucking...
That's an understatement.
Bro, all right, so I'll tell you the backstory of what happened there. So I'm sure you saw that I was recording in an actual studio that I used to run. And then all of that fell apart. Like the week you told me, hey, bro, I'm going to be in Miami. And I was like, fuck. Okay. So I just I got some office and I got like whatever shit I could buy. And I was like, bro, either I record this guy right now or I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life for not doing it.
We should have just went and rented a studio, bro. That's what we should have done.
I know.
For a couple $100. I'm sure we could have found a nice studio.
Yeah, there's plenty of them in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're popping up everywhere. They're like cockroaches in Miami.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
None out here, though. I guess that's why we built this.
Yeah. Yeah. But you also live in Connecticut, and it's freezing cold 7 months out of the year, so.
Yep, it's 15 degrees today, man. It's brutal. That's why I'm sick again for the second time in a month. So.
That sucks. He's been eating, like, soup for, like, 3 days.
Yeah, I just had a granola bar. It was my first real food in 3 days, man, ever since you got here. You brought the sickness to me.
No, I didn't. If anything, I'm the reason you're not like in bed. I'm giving you a little energy. I'm transferring the tropical vibes over.
Yeah, I had a little jolt of energy. I got my tea, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
So earlier I had your dad on, and it was cool to see his point of view from everything that happened. And also he was the first family member I ever had. I've never interviewed like a family member of someone who got indicted. So it was cool. First off, your dad is the fucking coolest guy I've ever met. Real stand-up guy. I can see a lot of the good principles of like who you are as a person and why you're such a stand-up dude because of him, And it's cool that you had someone to support you throughout that whole thing like him. He's a real solid guy. It reminded me a bit of my mother. My mother was like the only one who really supported me throughout my indictment while I was in prison, went to see me as often as possible. My mom lives in Louisiana. She would fly all the way to Orlando and drive to Coleman to see me like every weekend. So yeah, man, it was cool having him on. I saw a lot of the not only do you guys physically look the same, but like you work really hard and you're like you take risks. So I see where you got it from.
Yeah, he's a good man. I got a lot of love and respect for that man.
I
And it's
hope
cool
so.
that he gets to, come in here. He comes in every day, stops and hangs out with us, sees everything going on.
It's cool. So last time we talked a little bit more about like what got you into trouble, and we kind of ended it there. But this time, I'd actually kind of like to explore a little more on the actual. Let's talk about like the prison sentence itself, because that was 3 years. It was a fairly long time to say the least, right? So, so let's start with you're like the trial's over. You're going to prison, right? Let's pick it up from there, because I think that's kind of like where yeah, I think that's exactly where we left it off. So what happens? Like trial ends and you're convicted. Let's start from there. What happens?
Well, I didn't have the luxury of self-surrendering like you,
Fuck, that sucks, bro.
I know. I mean, I wouldn't have the story I do if I did get to self-surrender. Most fraud cases in the feds do self-surrender.
Right.
But my sentencing kept getting delayed, and I was going out of state to gamble at the casino in New York because I didn't have I wasn't 21 yet, so I couldn't gamble in Connecticut. So I went out of state. My friends that worked with me at the club kind of ratted on me, and they told the feds.
What a bunch of fucking losers, bro.
Yeah, told the feds, and then they revoked my bond, and I got sentenced to pretrial detention. They call it pretrial, a month before sentencing. And I'm thinking like the judge is just going to do it like a scared straight program. Like this is my wake up call, this and that. So I was there for like 21 days that sentencing happened. I'm 21 at this time now. It's October 2016. And he ends up sentencing me to 3 years and 1 year house arrest and 3 years supervised release. The government, after trial, my PSI was 8 to 12 years. Government asked for 6 to 8. My lawyer said 0, just house arrest. And the judge kind of met in the middle.
Yeah, I remember the day I got sentenced. My lawyer actually was like, "Oh, I'm going to request." He does 100% of his sentence on house arrest, and the judge goes, "Oh, 100% of his sentence. Yeah, that's not happening." My lawyer led me on the whole time thinking there was a good chance I was not going to prison, and obviously I was similar to you. I had never gotten indicted. I never dealt with like the federal government or any of that shit, so I didn't know. I just followed what my lawyer told me. And then later, after I was in prison, is when I found out that the feds have a 98% conviction rate. So we weren't really set up to win. But anyway, so you violate, right? Pretrial, sent you to pretrial detention. You get sentenced. Where are you during pretrial? Like, where are you being held? And then where do you get transferred to after you get sentenced?
There's a place called Wyatt in Rhode Island where kind of like the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut people go because there's no county jails really in Connecticut. So I was there, and then after I got sentenced, like 2 weeks later, they transported me into the BOP custody. You go to Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn for like a month, the MCC or the MDC, Metropolitan Detention Center. And then from there, they designate you. And my first location was Fort Dix in New Jersey, which is one of the largest low-security federal prisons in the country.
I remember. Oh, so they sent you straight to a low.
Yeah, my points were 1 too high, apparently, which was ironic.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I was a 12. I had 12 points, and I think it was because they thought I didn't have a high school diploma because they made me take GED classes because they didn't have my diploma on file, and your points will get jacked up for age, not having your high school diploma, all of that stuff. Criminal history. So I was at 12, so I went to a low. And I was at a low for about a year and a half before I went to a camp for the last year.
What made your points be so high? Because wasn't it total like the loss amount a couple $100,000?
Age is a big factor. You automatically get like 7 or 8 points if you're under 25.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, age plays a big factor. If you're, young, kind of a hothead or something, I guess that's how they look at it. But age racks up your points right away. And then I had base level criminal history, which was like no criminal history, all of that. So, and then that's why I think and then not taking responsibility, all that. But then the education.
Oh, that's right, because you went to trial. That's
and then the education thing I think is what threw me over.
Okay. Fuck. So you're 1 point over there, and they say ship you over low. I heard Fort Dix is a total circus.
Yeah, Vortex is the hood, man. That's like the streets, bro. Like there's one guard to a 400-man unit.
Holy shit.
Their old army barracks converted into dorms. It's like 12-man rooms, 6 bunks, a table, the chairs, the lockers, and then there's bathrooms on each floor. 2 sets of bathrooms on each floor. On the bottom level is a pool table, the mail room, little workout area, and the TV room, and then the officer station. And yeah, it's the hood, man. Guys are gambling, making hooch, cooking, all of that. The microwave room, it's crazy.
That's wild. You remember Jeremy Grove, right? My boy that was on your...
Yep. I met Jeremy.
He did time in Fort Dix. I don't know if you guys crossed paths.
No, never crossed paths. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, he that's originally why he told me that. He's like, yo, put me in contact with Ian, because I actually did time in Fort Dix. So.
Yeah, Fort Dix. Anyone that knows Fort Dix, like Travis Cullen too, all those guys, it's crazy. Johnny Bart was over there at Fort Dix. It was a madhouse over there.
That's wild. All right, so this is what year?
This is 2016 December. I got to Fort Dix.
Okay.
And then I left there in like July of 2017.
Okay, right. So the whole time, I remember your dad saying that they were fighting to get you into like a camp that whole time.
Yeah, well, we were fighting to get into a camp, or at the very least get back to Danbury, because Danbury had a low. Like, if you're gonna send me to a low, why didn't you just send me to Danbury to begin with? Because Fort Dix was like 3 hours away.
Right.
Danbury's 5 minutes away from my house, and Danbury had a low security federal prison, but it was a lot smaller, a lot cushier. If I had been sent there, I probably would never have even wanted to go to a camp, because I'm right there. I would have just did my whole time there, but that wasn't the case.
So tell me the difference you felt. Obviously, the first time you went in was to Rhode Island, but like, tell me the difference you felt going into Rhode Island and like going into Fort Dix. Like, what was?
Oh, it's night and day. I mean, Rhode Island, these detention centers, even MDC, it's like what you see on TV on 60 Days In, the tier, the lock cells, all of that. You're only out certain parts of the day. There's really jack shit to do. You're just in a unit. There's some TVs hanging on the walls, a little concrete outdoor rec area. Nothing to do. You're just sitting in this unit all day. But when you get to an actual designation, like a camp or a low or even a medium or a pen, there's movement. You're walking around. There's activities like the library. There's you get a job. There's you go to an actual chow hall. Whereas at these other facilities, like at Rhode Island, the trays are just delivered to you during the meals. There's no movement. So there's a lot more freedom in these facilities. And then you have the contraband phones, you have the multiple TVs, you have all of that, where you don't have that in the other facilities.
Okay. So we're gonna get back to Fort Dix in a second, but so you spend 6 months there and then you get shipped to where?
I went back to Brooklyn, and then from Brooklyn I went to Philly. From Philly, I went back to Brooklyn. During this transit, they put me through like diesel therapy, and then I ended up in Danbury, which was my hometown.
Did you do the whole Oklahoma thing where they transferred you and all that?
That was after I got kicked out of Danbury for dating a guard's cousin years prior. He reported that he was friends with me. He used to come to our house for, dinner, barbecues, whatnot. He reported it. They locked me up, put me in the shoe.
Wow. So how long did they hold you in Danbury before he kind of realized that and reported it?
Oh, I was only on the yard for like 5 hours.
5 hours?
I didn't even meet my bunkmate. I had my bag dropped off there, didn't get my property, nothing. They called me to the lieutenant's office and brought me the shoe. And I was in the shoe for 3 months there in Danbury.
That sucks.
Yeah, I was in the shoe. That's how I met Spencer and Sammy and all those guys that were there. Because I was there just on an admin hold and not there for disciplinary or a check-in or anything, they made me the orderly. So I was painting the cells white, repainting them white. I was doing the laundry. The guy called me Squints from the Sandlot.
Oh, shit.
The head guard, the head unit tier guy that was there Monday through Friday, which coincidentally enough lives in my apartment building now. We haven't run into each other, but I see his car. I see him walk in. We just haven't connected yet.
You can't make this shit up?
Yeah, you can't at all.
So you become the head orderly at the shoe. At some point, they're going to move you, right? So you're hanging out. You said you spent 3 months, 90 days in there?
Yeah, I did about another 3 months, and then they tell me I got designated to a camp and that it starts with an O, and I'm thinking it's Otisville, like the nicest federal prison camp. Well, it turned out to be Oxford, Wisconsin. I had to go on Con Air, all of that, and go get shipped out to Wisconsin, which took another 2 or 3 months to get there. They put me through Oklahoma, then Chicago, and then eventually to Oxford.
Okay. So now you get shipped to an actual camp, which is where you should have been in the first place. They send you to one all the way in the middle of the country. At this point, are you kind of like used to being in the system or used to being in the prison, or every time they move you, are you still like a little startled? Or
No, by the time I got to the camp, I was almost 2 years in, a year and a half in, so I knew how to do time at that point. I was comfortable. The system and a camp's easy. There's no politics. No one was gonna think I was a sex offender because they're not allowed at the camp. It was chill. It was really laid back. It was 100 inmates to one guard, and they had a dog program, bocce ball courts, volleyball courts, a track, a weight area, TVs, all this stuff. Everyone had phones. It was just so laid back. It was the country out there, Guys were driving the snow plows, inmates. They had like the camp driver, all of that. And there's no fence. Guys were running through the woods to hook up with their wives and bring back bags. It was so laid back.
Yeah, that was similar to Coleman where I was at. The guys were running out in the middle of the night to go jump in a parked car where their girlfriend was waiting for them.
Exactly. That's what goes on at these camps. We were eating great Mexican food, Chinese food,
Whatever,
pizza.
McDonald's.
Yeah, there was Chicago subs, like with the jardinera and stuff. We were living. It was great, It was easy time there, I didn't have any problems. Got to do whatever I wanted.
Are you seeing a drastic difference in, obviously, in the type of people from facility to facility?
You still have your typical sometimes scummy type people that had worked their way down to there, like snaky people. But at the camp, no one's really acting hard, and the guys that do act hard are kind of full of it because they don't want to get kicked out of the camp.
Right.
It's a sweet spot. Most of the guys at the camp told and took plea deals and got there. So, because it's 10 years and under, and, it's half of them are snitches, and there's very few people that went to trial in the feds anyways. I was one of the few.
But I also encountered the latter half, which was like the dudes who had done a shitload of time that had worked their way down. Was there any of that stuff there?
There was a couple guys that had worked their way down from like a medium or a low, like where I came from, but they were already there for so long, they adjusted to it, Most of the people while I was here that were coming in there was a couple people that, worked their way down that while I was there that, would have a hard time adjusting. Or there was guys that come off the street that self-surrender. There was a ton of people that self-surrendered while I was there.
Yeah, that's I got lucky there. They threw the hammer down on me, and they basically told my lawyer, listen, when does he want to go in? And I actually got sentenced in October, and I figured let me just spend the holidays with my family. And I told him let me go in January, and then he was like, yeah, all right, you're going in January 9th, and he fucking done. But then before I could say anything, January 9th was my fucking sister's birthday. So for my sister's 32nd birthday, her fucking birthday present was dropping off her baby brother at prison. It's
Well, at least you got to spend the holidays with them.
Yeah. So, all right. So back to the Oxford camp. At this point, you've done how long? A year and a half?
Yeah, I'd say probably like 18 months because I did about a year there.
So I remember your dad saying that you spent, up until that time, you had spent a lot of time in the SHU, or was that
about
only
6 months? Yeah, between some time at Fort Dix and then when I was in Philly in transit, and then in Danbury was another 3 months.
How come you went to the SHU in Fort Dix?
I got caught on a phone. Like there was a video of me getting like choked out wrestling or whatever, and they were like, "Oh, do you want?" When they raided the room and found it, they were like, "Do you want to go in protective custody?" I was like, "Yeah, these guys are trying to fucking extort me in this place. Get me out of here." So they put me in the SHU.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
they wrapped up our whole room and whatnot. So I just used it as a way to get out of
Get
that.
out of there.
Yeah, I was like, get me out of here. I didn't snitch on anyone or anything. I just want to go,
Okay. That's a lot of time in the SHU. 6 months in the SHU is a long time, man.
Yeah, at least it helped that it was split up in different locations. And then their rule is like when you're in transit, if you come from the SHU, you stay in the SHU. So that's why when I got stuck at Philly for the 6 weeks, I was screwed. I was in the SHU because the hurricane hit in Puerto Rico, so it stopped all transit in the BOP.
Any excuse not to do their fucking job, let me tell you. These guys.
It was bad. So I was stuck there. I had a sex offender for a cellmate. They always put me in with the white guys that were sex offenders because they knew I wouldn't give them any problems. And that's what happened. And then I eventually made it to Oxford.
That's what happened when you first got to prison. They assumed you were a chomo because you were white.
All the time, white glasses. Most guys there for fraud are not my age, they're middle-aged. And the guys that are chomos say they're there for fraud as a cover. So they didn't believe me. And then eventually when they saw my paperwork and everything, they knew I was legit.
Right, but once that's only like in the low, right? Like once you get to the camp, they don't let chomos go past the low.
No chomos or violent offenders, or if you're wanted or have a detainer or anything, are allowed at the camp.
Right. I remember, I never had to go to the low, but I had a ton of guys I had one guy who came down from the pen. I had several guys who came down from the medium. So they told me, they explained all that stuff to me. They were like, because Coleman is actually the biggest federal facility in the country. So they have 2 pens, a medium, a low, and a camp. So all those guys that came down, they explained all that to me. They're like, listen, there's a bunch of chomos at the low. They only stay here, this and that. You can only, so I learned a lot about the criminal justice system in my short time in the prison. Anyway, so, all right, at the camp, what, you're getting into your time, right? It's kind of chill. At that point, what's going through your mind as far as like did you already have an idea of what you wanted to do when you get out? Like what's your day to day? Like what's going on?
So I worked in the kitchen. I'd hustle even though I didn't really need the money. It was fun to hustle. I was a cheesecake man too. I'd make non-baked cheesecakes. I also ran through the woods to bring back bags of stuff, like of contraband.
You're taking a lot of risks, man.
Yeah, I love the adrenaline. I've always been a risk taker. I'd ran the blackjack table. I played spades. I played dice. I gambled a lot. And then like the last month, I gave everything up. Didn't even have a phone and whatnot because I was so focused on getting home. And I was working out every day too. I was running a lot. I was lifting. I learned how to lift and stuff for the first time ever. We would take like cinder blocks and create our own weights and stuff. And then when I got out, I was so gung-ho about getting a book deal, getting a movie deal, or starting a nightclub again was my other plan. I figured that was my road to redemption, and I was very gun-ho on that. Thank God the nightclub thing didn't work out because COVID would happen a year later. I got out in January 2019. So had I managed to find money and start the nightclub, it would have all been destroyed.
Failed.
Yeah, it would have failed miserably. So luckily that didn't happen. And, I had like 300 no's from literary agents and stuff. And that was kind of just like the situation. So it forced me to go get a job. And I found myself at Whole Foods. I started there, $15 an hour, hot bar cook, low level job, running the hot bar, working. They hired me part-time. I was trying to get as many hours as I could. And I was working a second job at a pizzeria. So I would work at Whole Foods 6 to 2:30 and then the pizzeria 3 to 11. And I'd do that 6 days a week. And then I would go to the gym super early, barely get any sleep. And I did that and worked my way all the way up to supervisor, to assistant manager, and then the team leader. And then I got to open my own store in Massapequa and Long Island until the position opened back up at Danbury to come back and be the team leader there for prepared foods. And when I left there in 2022, I was making $33 an hour. I was going to make over $100K that year with overtime. My first $100K ever in my life.
That's awesome, man. Whole Foods. How long did it take you to move up after you got out? Like from the day you got out to like the day you were making that kind of money? How long was that?
So I got hired in May 2019, $15 an hour. By right before COVID, I got promoted to 17. And then 6 months after, I got to associate team leader, which was 21. And then from 21, I went to 28 when I got the team leader job. Like another 6 months after that, that was end of 2021. And then when I came back in the beginning of 22 to Danbury, I got a market adjustment and ended up at just about 33. So I was making 33 an hour.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, so I did that in 3 years.
3 years out of prison, making $33 an hour.
Criminal record, no college degree, baby.
Luckily, they Whole Foods doesn't run a background check to get hired, do they?
They do, but drug offenses are hireable. It's basically nonviolent or shoplifting. You can't have any type of shoplifting or stuff. But I was fine, and obviously people would look at me and say, "Oh, that's a guy that went to prison and stuff." And because I was very out there in the news, and then I had like an HBO doc done about me and a Vice documentary. But
Was that prior to going to prison or after?
that was during my time at Whole Foods. That was in 2021 that came out. We filmed during COVID, came out in 2021, but it didn't really like blow me up. HBO Max was very small at the time, and only got like a couple thousand followers on Instagram. And I was just so dedicated to Whole Foods. I thought that was my path in life.
No, but I mean, if you think about it for a second, you kind of wanted the book deal and the movie deal and everything, and it kind of happened in a way.
Not really.
Not really, but
you look at some of these people that get these things, they blow up overnight. You know, that get the documentaries and stuff. It was kind of the wrong platform. Didn't, had what I hoped for it to be. And then, a year later they pulled it when they merged with Discover, which looking at it now is a blessing because now there's a market for something like that when the time comes.
It's still pretty sick though.
Yeah, it's sick to pull off, but there's more that could be told.
Of
and
course.
The cool thing is that was not even nearly the end of my story. I mean, the episode ends with me working at Whole Foods paying restitution, a few $100 a month. Never did we discuss prison in that, and never did we think it would ever be this, I knew I would always probably end up somewhere, but, I didn't think it was going to be this. I mean,
Right.
I really, the comeback when you look at the journey is it's pretty interesting, to be able to build this and have this now. This is something I never had before in my life.
I mean, let alone most people never have this. Let alone someone who's been to federal prison, gets out and kind of like lives what you had to go through. The redemption arc is definitely there, and as you know now, that's a big motivation for me. That's the whole thing with Honor Among Thieves. Like, I want to show the world that we're not what you think we are. We come in all shapes and sizes. We have, all kinds of backgrounds, ethnicities, and we're not as bad as you think we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
definitely. So they do the documentary. You're still working at Whole Foods. You're making $33 an hour. At what point are we talking about like social media, getting your story out there? At what point does that happen in that whole trajectory?
So the summer of 2022, my best friend Mike Squires, who was my videographer at the club, says, Ian, you got to start sharing your story on TikTok or on social media in general. Because at that point, like all the hype from the doc kind of buzzed down. Nothing was really happening. I was getting kind of fed up in the corporate world. And COVID had blew up all of these prison creators and all these influencers in general because of TikTok. And so I procrastinated for months, bought all the gear. Like I did what you did and what everyone that gets out does, thinking, you got to do this, you got to do that. And literally the key to my success was there all along. I didn't need anything fancy. I just seen my phone. And it was very cringe, like being in front of my phone and telling stories. And, I started with nightclub stories. I would get a couple hundred views or a couple thousand views. But it was my fifth video that it was the first time I ever talked about prison publicly. And that did millions of views overnight. And ever since that day in, August of 2022, I never missed a day posting ever. I posted every single day, just grinding, making selfie videos in my car, maxing out my credit cards because I wasn't making any money, but I knew this is what I was supposed to be doing because it was working. And I quit my job and I just doubled down on it. And then eventually I partnered with these guys that gave me the idea to do a podcast. And I launched a podcast, didn't know what podcasting was, but we called it Locked In with Ian Bick in January 2023. First episodes are so cringe. The set sucked. The angle sucked. Everything about it sucked. The questions sucked. I was just reading off a script, and over time I just learned to get better, and I adjusted, and I took the feedback, and I was able to create something cool out of it from learning, from getting out of my own way and making it about the guest. I think a lot of podcasters fail when they make it about themselves. That's why I don't have an intro in my show anymore, because you got to think, if you have all these listeners listening to you, do they want to hear that same intro episode after episode after episode, So there's no intro. It just starts, welcome to Locked In. Here we go. Let's roll with the guest. And I've just learned now I just do everything myself. I learned the business.
As I'm a podcaster too, obviously, so I can relate to the betting on yourself. I admire that about you, man. I respect that because it takes that like the fear of what could go wrong, or like what if this happens or what if that happens, that's always looming in your brain, especially someone with a criminal record. I can completely relate because, you know, as anybody who's done time, it's always like, fuck, man, I'm already like starting off on the wrong foot. What if this happens? People are going to judge me. And you just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And and it paid off, you know. But it's easy to look at it now and say it paid off. But in the moment, it takes guts, you know, to take that risk.
I mean, I think and also I had done that before so many times and it hadn't worked out, you know? So you're going to have failure. It's not like I took this big risk and then it worked, you know? This was like my 5th risk in my life, or 6th risk, you know? And it just happened to work out.
Why, if the risk hadn't worked out earlier in your life, what made you want to take this one?
I think I've always been a risk taker. I think I'm a big believer in you have to try it. Like I gave myself, like if I put 30 grand on my credit cards. I lived off my credit cards to get it started booking flights for people. And I was lucky to have a partnership with these people that believed in me, that, you know, we split revenue they did the production stuff and all of that in the beginning. But it was a really interesting sense of, you know, putting it all on the line and maxing everything out and, you know, taking that big risk. I had in my mindset that, okay, if there was going to be a certain point that I would have went back to Whole Foods because I knew that was always there. I mean, if I lost everything tomorrow, I could go find a job. I'm a worker, you know?
Right.
I don't feel bad for people that, you know, are complaining that everything's going shitty when it's like, okay, go get a job as a dishwasher. Like, I'm not afraid to do whatever it takes, you know, in that sense. So if I lost everything tomorrow, I'm still good. I'll go work somewhere. You know, it's not the end. What matters is not continuously piling up debt and crawling your way out of that. But there's always a way.
Right. It's better to like fall flat on your face and have to go do something else than not trying at all.
Yeah, and we all fall down, you know? That's a part of it, you know? You learn, you grow, you pivot, and you keep moving forward.
Who was, because before I saw your content and I checked out your podcast and I became like a listener of your show, I didn't really know of anybody else in this niche. I didn't know this was a whole thing, like prison, you know, crime content, whatever. So once you started getting your bearings, did that open up doors and you saw other people do, or were you kind of like someone who kind of set a niche? Like, tell me about that.
Well, I think when I first started, I saw that there was a lot of prison content creators that would tell their own personal stories on a webcam for YouTube, like the YouTubers, and then they would interview sometimes each other, but no one was ever doing it in person. The only other person that was doing that was like Johnny Mitchell, but he started doing just his own personal stories. He had gotten into interviewing kind of around the same time as me anyways, but he was focusing on just drug stories. So I would say me and Johnny were the only ones that really took that interviewing thing to the moon with it, whereas a lot of the other ones weren't. So there was an opening for that. Now all these other people have prison podcasts, you know, there's so many of that, which is fine, but it's just everyone has to carve out their own niche. Like I've been able to carve out that I have law enforcement, victims, ex-cons, judges, attorneys, like very widespread. And Johnny kind of just interviews the drug stories or the crime stories in that sense, or certain types of figures. He's very choosy, whereas mine's more broad. So those are our niches. Now, the new people coming into the space like Kevin, he's focusing on addiction because he knows that's working for him. You'll have to find your rhythm for what you want to do with yours, and same with everyone else that's kind of coming into it. And there's plenty of room to go around. It's just about finding what your angle is that works if you want to get it to succeed.
Yeah, niching down for me has been big. You know, I was kind of like in the beginning, I was all over the place, and, you know, my content didn't really hit the way I wanted it to. And then what I noticed was every time I mentioned prison, you know, the clip would do great. And then me being stubborn, instead of being like, bro, this works, maybe I should explore this avenue, be like, no, you know, let me try to talk about other stuff. Until it's really when I came here and I started recording here that I was like, man, what am I doing? You know, let's just stick to what works here. And regardless, I came to my senses and I was like, man, I'd rather sit down with a dude who has a crazy criminal history and a crazy crime story and did a bid and see what he's doing in his life today and see how he turned it around than talk about motivation or any other horseshit out there. I don't want to be Patrick Bet-David. I don't want to be fucking, Alex Hormozy. I want to be me. What do I like? And that's kind of like how I came into the niche.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of those podcasts out there of those people that you were just describing. So that's why it's about being different. That's why Locked In I think, is successful because it catered to a market that wasn't there. People are tired of seeing the same guests on every podcast. That's why I always tell people when I tell Kevin and stuff, it's so important. You got to go out and make your own connections and
100%.
find your own guests. Because I guarantee you, if you look at the data, the guests that we don't connect to you and you find on your own that have never been on a podcast before will do better view-wise than anyone else you've had on the podcast.
100%. And that's what I'm really excited about. There's so many stories in Miami that I'm going to bring out to the world, and so many stories that I personally have met throughout my bid and just throughout my life, like that I know people who are kind of like, ex-cons or reform criminals, that kind of stuff. And I'm excited to bring that to the world, really.
Yeah.
And kind of my ultimate goal, really, you've inspired me to kind of like do what you did up here, but do it in Miami, and Miami's like a different animal. It really is.
Yeah.
So where do you see the space, like, as far as kind of not just podcasting, but maybe this specific niche? Where do you see it going? Like, do you see it maybe eventually getting saturated at some point? Is there more niches within the niche that can be made? Like, what are your thoughts?
No, I don't think it'll get saturated. I think I think it'll get saturated if people keep circulating the same guests, because then it's no different than the celebrity thing. So it is getting saturated when you have the same guests being, circulated through.
Right.
It's so important to find your own avenue, your own approach to it, There's a lot of clients that will come in that want to like replicate Locked In and do exactly that. And it's just not going to work to that degree because it's already been done. You have to, like, you look at all these brands, there's plenty of soda brands, there's plenty of chip brands, but each one has their different twist to it. So you have to find your own different twist. That's the biggest key to it, to find success in it.
Authenticity. It's a big part of it.
You got to have an angle, whether you're a great interviewer asking certain questions or, you're looking at it very differently. Like Kevin focuses on the mental health and the addiction aspect. And, I focus on more of the whole picture of their story, like a mini documentary. So like, that's what you have to ask yourself. What is my angle to these stories?
I love that. Is there anybody in particular where at any point in your story where you kind of said, man, you turned around for a second and you accomplished something, you kind of like, man, I'm going to do that one day. And then you realize you did it and you're like, fuck, I've made it. Was there any point in your story where you're like, man, all right, I think I made it? Or...
I mean, I think I'm successful at what I do, but there's so much more to grow. I'm not even at the top yet. I'm probably a B or a C, on the podcast level, or C+, B-. There's so much more room to grow, so much more to improve on, keep honing in on my skills. I'm saying no to more. Like, I want to make it so I'm just recording one episode a day and doing certain things a certain way and keeping it consistent and the quality good and everything like that. I don't want to travel to do podcasts. I want to do everything in studio. So things like that I've learned can get me a long way.
Is there anybody that that's still doing time that you still keep in contact with that sees your content?
No, my one of my bunk mates that had a lot of time just got out recently, like a year ago, that we're in touch. Won't do the show though. And then there's guys that obviously watch my content for prison or have seen me on social media that will DM me, but no one that I was personally in prison with that I know and communicate with are still in there.
How many people? I mean, I know it's hard because at this point you get blown up. I've seen your phone. It's like, it's ridiculous. Do you get messages from like people often who are just fresh out or whatever, like trying to reach out just to say like, yo, I watch your stuff. This is cool. You can kind of give me hope.
Yeah, I get DMs all the time, messages all the time, emails all the time. I try to respond to as many as possible. And I think that's gone a long way in building the platform too, because it's real authentic and it's me communicating with them.
Yeah, That's something about your brand that makes you different. It's very personal.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
communicate with people. If people DM me now, I'll just say, hey, fill out the form, and my assistant will get them booked, and at least they're getting that interaction.
So May 2023, I get out. I'm stuck in the halfway house. I was supposed to be sent home. I'm in my halfway house, and I have my phone now, and some of my clips are blowing up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's working, right? Like, this was my plan. I had scheduled all these podcasts so that they premiered while I was gone and all that. And then I get this internship at this podcast studio, and then I can start recording again. Bro, I still had the ankle bracelet on. It was crazy. Like, I would wear pants and shit so nobody could see him. Anyway, so I get there, I do an episode with somebody, and then they whip out their phone and they're like, bro, do you know this guy? I look, and it's you.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no, man, who is he? He's like, dude, this is Ian Bick. He does prison content. You guys you got to talk to this guy. You guys have a lot in common. And then I was like, all right, cool. So I followed you and I DM'd you, but I didn't think you were going to respond. Bro, you responded like that same day. I said, oh, shit, man. Yo, your content's cool. You know, I would love to link up. You messaged me, and then the rest was history. I met you last March, and here we are a year later.
That's what it's all about, having those connections and interactions.
Yeah. Little did I know that, a year later I'd be sitting in your studio, recording out of your studio.
You never know. That's why you can't burn bridges. And,
No.
You just got to be a good person to people and help out when you can.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, bro. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, your success will only multiply because of who you are as a man, bro. Like, you really do bless other people. You are generous, and you're a good dude. You pay it forward. I think you're very conscious of how far you've come. You could have very easily been, some other dude who just gave up on his life and was like, fuck it, life didn't give me a shot. I got fucked, whatever, and kind of have that whole mindset that a lot of guys leaving prison have. And you didn't, you stuck to your guns, and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to go out and try to do something. And it's inspiring, bro. Really
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Of course. So long term, do you want to focus more on your show? Like, what's your plan as far as like your content? Do you want to maybe start other shows? Like, what do you want to do long term?
No, I just want to focus on the show, be in a good rhythm, a good schedule, and just keep everything in on the show. And other opportunities will come from that. I have some exciting things that are, in the works and coming about, and it'll only grow from there, and more will stem from that.
I love that. So in the immediate, I usually ask 4 questions at the end, but I'm going to break them down a little bit. So what's next for you? But I'm going to make that twofold, short term and long term. Kind of like break that down.
I mean, short term is, I guess, just keep continuing to grow our sponsors and our network and get exciting guests. And, long term, work up to a level where I have my own maybe separate TV show on a streaming site, or, selling to like a Spotify or something, or, just build it to the next level. I don't know where it's going to go, but I know if you keep producing and you're consistent, exciting things will happen.
Sick. How do you want to be remembered?
Probably as someone that never gave up, that grinded until the end and just put out, just was consistent, and just never gave up. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I had so many reasons to give up, and I didn't. I kept pushing forward.
Yeah, man. It's so easy just to not do things anymore, but choosing to show up one day after the other, it's fucking inspiring, man. Last 2 questions. Do you believe in redemption?
Yeah, I think redemption could be found in the most unexpected ways, places. Even people that are maybe serving life in prison for, very heinous things that they did, I'm sure they could find some sort of redemption with them in themselves in some way or form. But redemption is looked at very differently depending on the person you're talking to. And that's something you can only answer for yourself,
I agree. It's totally dependent on like how you feel about your own situation. Yeah, I feel the same way. Do you feel you've redeemed yourself?
I'd say when I pay off all the restitution, that'll be the final redemption arc. Because then what could people say about me in the end? As long as I get all the money back, then I think it's even.
On a personal note, though, like aside from the crime itself, like how is there anything else you think you need to do besides pay the restitution? Like, just not even from other people's eyes, but like in here, like besides, once you pay the restitution, you feel like you've been whole? Like,
Yeah, I think once I pay the restitution and I have built a successful business from that, I think everything is good on my end. I think I did what I set out to do. And I always said from day one that the money would be paid back. So if I could see that through, I think that's me winning in the end.
I love that, man. Ian, thanks for coming on. My life has literally changed from associating with you. Never in a million years. I mean, I'm a dude who just started a podcast and kind of like had a dream of being the Miami version of Joe Rogan. And never in a million years did I ever think I was going to have a friend who's doing the things you are. And not just a friend, you've become kind of a mentor to me, bro. Like, I don't take this lightly at all. I'm a dude who's trying to make it, I don't really, I see a lot of commonalities between you and me. Like, I work hard. I don't make excuses. I don't ask for handouts. I'm a prideful guy. Like, I want to show up and just put in work and learn as much as I can, implement everything that I think will make work. And like, you've inspired me. You've helped me. And I appreciate that.
Of course, brother. We got you covered, man.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you.
How can people connect with you?
Just go to ianbick.com. It's got everything linked there and whatnot. And, if they want to be a guest on the show, they can fill out the form there and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Alrighty, guys. Another episode of Honor Among Thieves podcast with your host, Nelson Rodriguez Jr. signing out. Push it to the limit. The world is yours. If you're not chasing a dream, life is meaningless, guys. Catch you on the next one. Say goodnight to the bad guy.
AKA Montana the Prophet.
So say goodnight to the bad guy.
You looking at the bad guy. This the last time that you ever see a bad guy like me. You don't have the guts to be who you wanna be.